Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In today's ongoing coverage of the civil war taking place inside of the former state of Ethiopia, the fighting continues. As we reported about yesterday, the Tigrayan Defense Forces have moved towards the town of Mille, achieving a breakthrough near Afar regional forces positions located west of Mille. And again, the Tigray Defense Forces are advancing along multiple routes along the B11, the B1, the A1, and other areas as well, very close to the town of Mille, and more specifically, the vital road junction that leads up along the A1 to the town of Samara. We obviously know there's an air base in Samara, and then obviously the main prize to Djibouti and the ports that bring in equipment and food and other material to the state, the former state of Ethiopia. And right now, this area is being utilized by the Abiy loyalists to receive goods and equipment and what have you. So again, a fairly significant focus right now by the Tigrayan Defense Forces to cut off this major road junction near the town of Mille, quite possibly looking at a move north east towards Samara. But again, the main objective right now is simply to seal off the road junction near Mille and prevent supplies from moving along those routes. Again, we can also confirm that the Tigrayan Defense Forces have pushed now more than 50 miles south of Desse and Kombolcha. So as we look back originally at the amount of forces by the Tigrayan Defense Forces that were brought up to besiege the cities of Desse and Kombolcha and then rapidly move into the city, in some cases engaging in urban fighting against Amhara regional militias and Fano organizations that were operating in Kombolcha and Desse. And those forces, again, were driven out. And then we saw those significant forces of the TDF being moved into Desse, into Kombolcha. And now a lot of these forces have pressed more than 50 miles south of Kombolcha. And we now know that the Tigrayan Defense Forces, the main body of the Tigrayan Defense Forces, have pushed on to Kamise, and now south of Kamise, we can report there are forward operating elements of the TDF now south of Ataye, and have in fact entered the town of Sinbete. We continue to see other operations both to the east and to the west, more specifically to the west, where we continue to see columns of Tigrayan Defense Forces moving along these rugged roadways to the west of Atay and other areas, again, west of the A2 highway. And again, these forces are pushing south and southwest along a fairly broad frontal zone running from Gadim over to Ataye and to a lesser extent to the east, and would seem to be pushing south with eventually the intent of quite possibly engaging the main defensive lines that appear to be being set up by the remnants of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces and further Amhara militia units within the area of Debre Sena and obviously Debre Burhan. Again, we've talked about this in other videos, but we believe Debre Sena is a vital strategic choke point where we believe the main body, the main defensive apparatus of the Abiy loyalists, of the Amhara militias, will try to hold their ground in this area and prevent a further move along the A2 highway towards the ultimate objective which would be Debre Berhan. And then if and when Debre Berhan is seized, obviously they become very, very, very close to the big prize of Addis Ababa, also known as Fene. But again, a general consolidation and continued movement of forces south of Dessie, south of Kombolcha. Again, I do not believe we will see this resolve itself within weeks, probably more like months. Again, the TDF is going to have to bring down significant forces that are extended from Dessie south and even Dessie north. And again, a lot of the equipment that has been captured near Weldia, south of Weldia, a lot of this equipment may have to be moved. In terms of equipment, I mean like heavy artillery and other assets are probably going to need to be moved down closer to the main front lines, and then eventually engage some of these defensive positions near Debre Sena, and then obviously Debre Berhan. Now, as these forces continue to move south, it's going to bring them closer to the main airbase of the Ethiopian Air Force. Again, that is located here in Bishoftu, and that area, again, this Air Force base contains most of the Ethiopian Defense Forces, the Ethiopian Air Force's infrastructure for its Air Force. Obviously, we probably most likely have drones, and then obviously we have a vast array of multi-role fighter bombers assigned to this airbase as well. As you can clearly see, Su-27s, you can see helicopter gunships, transport aircraft, and you can see that it is a significant facility. And what's happening is the Tigrayan Defense Forces would naturally be moving closer and closer to this airbase, which then gives the Ethiopian Air Force the opportunity to keep its planes in the air longer, especially over targets. Whereas before, if the Ethiopian Air Force was flying from this air base and it was targeting areas in near Kombolcha and Dessie, you were looking at a fairly significant distance, 160 miles. Now, as the Tigrayan Defense Forces continue to push south, especially when you get 50 miles south of Kombolcha, that's going to decrease that distance that it's going to take helicopter gunships and more specifically drones, and I'll get to that issue here very briefly. But again, as you start to get closer, obviously it's going to put the distance between you and this airbase that is operating some of these fixed-wing assets much closer. And we have received recent reports, that the Turks have been supplying additional assets to the Ethiopian military, the Abiy loyalists. And more specifically, it would appear that additional drones are being moved in all likelihood, I would assume that these drones would be used to defend, obviously, Addis Ababa, but also quite possibly defend Debre Berhan. Again, the distance that we're looking at as these forces get closer to the capital, again, is much closer and well within the range of, say, a TB2 drone. Whereas before, if the frontal lines move towards Debre Sena and Debre Berhan, again 75 miles and 92 miles, that is within decent range for the TB2 to operate. Again, the TB2 is not a long endurance drone. It is a short to medium, depending on the ordnance that it is carrying in the specific mission that it is attempting to conduct. But again, As they move closer, it inherently is going to put the TDF at risk of being struck by some of these shorter range drones. Whereas before, if we were looking at operations near Kombolcha and Dese, it was if these drones were operating out of that air base, obviously a bigger, much a larger distance. And again, we also know that they were quite possibly operating out of Samara and not as a greater distance in terms of near Addis Ababa, but still 103 miles in terms of a short range drone such as the TB2. It's simply not ideal for a TB2 drone to operate out of a Samara and operate within Kombolcha and Dese. But as these forces continue to move south, it's definitely going to bring them in range of these assets that would be located at the main Air Force base, just southeast of Addis Ababa. But we're watching that very, very closely. It's also another important issue is the amount of munitions that would be delivered by the Turkish state. It's just not the fact that they could be getting a half a dozen TB2 drones, but what is the quantity of the precision guided munitions that are going to be delivered to the Abiy loyalist. We know before that China had made deliveries to the Abiy loyalists, and we understand that number was about 50 precision guided munitions of a laser guided rocket that was delivered to be used by the Wing Loon drones of the Ethiopian intelligence agencies. Now, with that being said, obviously, if they start operating the TB2 drone just outside of Addis Ababa, that is a different asset. Obviously, the TB2 has better optics and, more importantly, has the capability to fire that very high quality MAM-L missile, which I've talked about before, MAML micro munition, which was very effective in the Azeri-Armenian conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, with that being said, is that going to change the outcome in the course of this conflict with the delivery of quite possibly more of these TB2 drones, if in fact they were originally delivered in the first batch? It's very difficult to say. Again, they're not going to be deployed in the numbers that we observed in the Azeri-Armenian conflict, among other assets as well that the Turks provided to the Azeris. Now, if we're just seeing a half a dozen drones and some micro munitions being delivered, probably not going to change the scope of the conflict. Obviously, it could become a hindrance as these forces advance near Debre Burhan and then eventually start to move south, because again, the closer you get within the operating range of a lot of these aircraft, you're going to see a pickup in tempo of air operations by the Abiy loyalist Air Force that is operating near Addis Ababa. But again, that's what we're watching right now. We'll continue to watch the situation and report on ongoing events. But again, right now, fairly significant amounts of forces continue to move south, southwest, quite possibly towards its ultimate goal of Addis Ababa. And these forces right now, we estimate number in the tens of thousands that are moving in the direction of Addis Ababa along the A2 highway. Again, we'll continue to monitor the situation and report. Have a great day, everybody.